March 6, 1940. 1,130 hours. Kollaa River sector, Finnish Karelia. Simo Häyhä lay motionless in the snow, barely visible against a white forest floor, watching Soviet soldiers move through the tree line 400 meters away. He'd been in this exact position for 6 hours without moving, his white camouflage making him invisible, his breathing so controlled that no vapor escaped to reveal his location in the minus 35 degrees Celsius cold. The snow around him was pristine, undisturbed, showing no sign that a human being had been lying here since before dawn. It was his 100th consecutive day of combat. In those 100 days, December through early March, Simo Häyhä had killed more than 500 Soviet soldiers with his Finnish M28-30 rifle, a modified Mosin-Nagant with iron sights. That was an average of 5 kills per day, every day, for over 3 months. Not counting the estimated 200 additional kills he'd achieved with his Suomi KP-31 submachine gun during close-quarters engagements. The Soviets called him Belaya Smert, the White Death. They'd sent entire squads specifically to hunt him down. They'd called artillery strikes on areas where they suspected he might be hiding, obliterating square kilometers of forest in attempts to kill one man. They deployed their own elite snipers from the NKVD, the Soviet secret police, with orders to find and eliminate the Finnish ghost who was killing Soviet soldiers faster than any sniper in history. None of it had worked. Simo was still here, still hunting, still invisible in the white wilderness. Through the tiny gap in the snow bank he'd constructed around his position, Simo watched the Soviet patrol move carelessly through the trees. They were cold, tired, probably hungry. They moved in a group, seeking warmth and safety in numbers. They didn't scan the snow ahead properly. They didn't look for the subtle signs, the too-perfect snow formation, the barely visible rifle barrel, the shadow that shouldn't exist. Simo's finger rested lightly on the trigger of his M28-30. The rifle was an extension of his body after 100 days of constant use. He knew exactly how it would shoot at this temperature, in this wind, at this distance. He knew that the cold had changed the rifle's zero by approximately 2 inches at 400 meters. He knew that his hands, despite 6 hours in the snow, would be steady when the moment came. Then he saw it. A glint, brief, barely visible, but unmistakable to someone who'd spent 100 days watching for exactly that kind of mistake. 150 meters away, partially hidden behind a snow-covered log, the reflection of winter sunlight off glass. A scope, a Soviet counter-sniper, positioned to watch the area where Simo had been operating for the past week. The Soviet sniper was good. Simo could tell from the position selection, the camouflage, the patience. But he'd made one critical mistake. He was using a telescopic scope. In the brutal Finnish winter, a scope created 2 problems. First, the glass could fog or frost, limiting visibility. Second, and more importantly, the glass could reflect light, revealing position. Simo never used a scope. He used iron sights exclusively, even at ranges where most snipers considered a scope essential. Iron sights meant no glint, no reflection, no betrayal of position. Iron sights meant his eye was closer to the rifle, making his head a smaller target. Iron sights meant simplicity. No moving parts to freeze, no glass to fog, no adjustments to make in rapidly changing conditions. The Soviet sniper was scanning the forest methodically, probably searching for Simo based on intelligence about his recent kills in this sector. He was looking in approximately the right area. In another few seconds, he might notice the snow formation that concealed Simo's position. Simo made the smallest possible adjustment to his rifle, moving the barrel perhaps 2 inches. The Soviet sniper was at 150 meters, an easy shot for someone of Simo's skill. He'd killed men at 400 meters, 500 meters, even 800 meters with iron sights in conditions where most snipers wouldn't attempt a shot. What Simo didn't know, as he lined up his shot on the Soviet counter-sniper, was that there were 2 of them, and the second one, positioned 200 meters to the east, had just seen the tiniest movement of Simo's rifle barrel and was bringing his own weapon to bear. At 1,132 hours on March 6, 1940, on Simo Häyhä's 100th consecutive day of combat, both snipers fired simultaneously. Simo's bullet struck the Soviet sniper in the head, killing him instantly. The Soviet's bullet struck Simo in the face. This is the story of Simo Häyhä, the farmer who became the deadliest sniper in military history, the man who killed more than 500 Soviet soldiers in 100 days, and the soldier who survived an explosive bullet to the face only to wake up the day the war ended. It's a story of how one small man defending his homeland became a legend that terrified an entire army, and how he did it all with humility, skill, and an iron determination that nothing, not cold, not artillery, not counter-snipers, not even a bullet through his face, could break. Simo Häyhä was born on December 17, 1905, in the small farming community of Rotjärvi in the Viipuri province of southern Finland, near the Russian border. He was the second of 8 children born to Juho and Katriina Häyhä, Finnish farmers who worked a modest plot of land in the Karelian wilderness. The exact circumstances of his birth weren't recorded in any detail. Finnish rural families in 1905 didn't maintain elaborate records, and Simo's family was more concerned with survival than documentation. Rotjärvi in 1905 was part of the Grand Duchy of Finland, an autonomous region within the Russian Empire. Finland had been under Russian control since 1809, when Sweden, Finland's previous ruler, ceded it to Russia after the Finnish War. The relationship between Finland and Russia was complicated, marked by periods of relative autonomy and periods of aggressive Russification, where Russian authorities tried to force Finnish culture to conform to Russian norms. By the time Simo was born, tensions were high. Finns valued their cultural identity, their language, their independence of spirit. The Russian Empire wanted compliance and assimilation. Simo grew up in this environment of quiet resistance and fierce independence. The Häyhä family farm was small, perhaps 15 acres, carved from the endless forest that covered Karelia. The work was hard, physical, and constant. Spring meant planting, potatoes, rye, barley, whatever would grow in the short Finnish summer. Summer meant tending crops and making hay for the livestock. Fall meant harvest, storing food for the brutal winter ahead, preparing the farm for months of snow and cold. Winter meant survival, feeding animals, cutting firewood, hunting to supplement stored food, enduring temperatures that regularly dropped to -30 or -40 Celsius. Simo learned to work from the age he could walk. Finnish farming culture didn't coddle children. You contributed to the family's survival as soon as you were physically capable. By age 5, Simo was feeding chickens and collecting eggs. By age 8, he was helping in the fields during harvest. By age 10, he was expected to do a man's work when the situation required it. The work made Simo strong despite his small size. He would never be tall. He reached his adult height of 160 centimeters, 5 feet 3 inches, by his mid-teens and stopped growing. But his body was compact, muscular, adapted to the physical demands of farming and life in the wilderness. His hands were strong from farm work. His legs were powerful from walking miles through snow. His endurance was extraordinary from working dawn to dusk regardless of weather. But it was a forest that truly educated Simo Häyhä. The forests around Rotjärvi were vast, dense, and wild. Pine and spruce grew so thick that sunlight barely reached the ground. Undergrowth made movement difficult, except along animal trails. In summer, the forest was a tangled green maze where you could get lost within minutes of leaving cleared land. In winter, the forest became a white wilderness where depth perception disappeared and landmarks vanished under meters of snow. Simo learned the forest from his father, who hunted to supplement the family's diet and income. Hunting wasn't sport for Finnish farmers. It was survival. Meat meant protein through the winter. Furs meant income to buy what couldn't be grown or made. Hunting skills meant the difference between a family that survived winter comfortably and a family that starved. Juho Häyhä taught his son everything. How to move silently through undergrowth, how to read animal tracks in snow and mud, how to find game trails and predict where animals would appear, how to shoot accurately with the old hunting rifles that Finnish farmers used. Most importantly, Juho taught Simo patience. Hunting wasn't about walking through the forest, shooting at everything that moved. Hunting was about understanding animal behavior, positioning yourself correctly, waiting, sometimes for hours, for the perfect shot, and making that shot count because ammunition was expensive and noise scared away other game. By age 12, Simo was hunting alone. By age 15, he was one of the most skilled hunters in Rotjärvi, known for consistently bringing home game even in conditions where other hunters returned empty-handed. He had an almost supernatural ability to see game before it saw him, to predict where animals would be, to make shots that others considered impossible. His specialty was shooting small game, rabbits, squirrels, birds, at distances where most hunters wouldn't attempt a shot. He used an old bolt-action rifle with iron sights, ammunition that was often cheap or reloaded, and he rarely missed. Villagers started talking about young Simo's shooting ability. Some said he could shoot a flying bird from 100 meters. Some said he could hit a running rabbit at 200 meters. The stories were exaggerated, but only slightly. Simo genuinely was that good. The skills he was developing Infinite patience, ability to remain motionless for hours in uncomfortable conditions, supernatural marksmanship with iron sights, understanding of how to use terrain and concealment, would one day make him the most effective sniper in military history. But in 1920, Simo Häyhä was just a 15-year-old farm boy who was very good at shooting rabbits. Finland gained independence from Russia in December 1917. Following the Russian Revolution, the new Finnish nation immediately descended into civil war. The Finnish Civil War of 1918, as communist red forces supported by Soviet Russia fought conservative white forces who wanted a democratic Finland aligned with the West. The whites won, but the war left deep scars and created lasting fear of Soviet expansion. The new Finnish government, recognizing that Finland's continued independence depended on military strength, instituted mandatory military service for all Finnish men. When Simo turned 20 in 1925, he reported for his compulsory military training. Simo served in the Finnish army from 1925 to 1927, completing his mandatory 2-year service. He was assigned to a bicycle infantry battalion, a uniquely Finnish military innovation where soldiers used bicycles for rapid movement through terrain where vehicles couldn't operate effectively. The training was rigorous: marksmanship, tactics, field craft, skiing, winter survival. Simo excelled at all of it, particularly marksmanship. Finnish military marksmanship training was among the most demanding in Europe. The Finnish army understood that Finland couldn't compete with potential enemies, primarily the Soviet Union, in numbers, equipment, or industrial capacity. Finland's military advantage would have to come from the superior training and skill of individual soldiers. Finnish soldiers needed to be able to shoot better, move better, survive better in harsh conditions than their enemies. Simo qualified as an expert marksman, achieving scores that placed him among the top shooters in his company. His instructors noted his exceptional skill with iron sights, his patience, his almost mechanical consistency. He didn't shoot with the flashy speed of some soldiers. He shot with methodical precision, making every shot count. After completing his military service in 1927, Simo returned to Rotjärvi and to farming. He bought a small farm adjacent to his family's land, planning to spend his life the way generations of Häyhä men had spent theirs, working the land, hunting the forest, raising a family, living quietly in the Karelian wilderness he loved. For the next 12 years, from 1927 to 1939, that's exactly what Simo did. He farmed, he hunted, he participated in local shooting competitions, winning consistently. He was known in Rotjärvi as a skilled marksman, a hard worker, a quiet man who kept himself and never caused problems. He didn't drink excessively. He didn't fight. He didn't chase women with the aggressive pursuit that characterized some young men in rural communities. He lived simply, worked hard, and was content with his life. He remained active in the Civil Guard, Suojeluskunta, a Finnish militia organization that trained citizens in military skills as a supplement to the regular army. The Civil Guard conducted regular shooting competitions, field exercises, and training. Simo attended regularly, maintaining and improving his shooting skills. He became known in Civil Guard circles as an exceptional shot, someone who could consistently hit targets that others missed. By 1939, at age 33, Simo Häyhä owned a small but productive farm, had a comfortable house, and was living the peaceful life he'd always wanted. He had no wife. He'd never married, apparently content with solitude, but he had family nearby, friends in the village, respect in the community. Then, on November 30th, 1939, the Soviet Union invaded Finland, and Simo Häyhä's quiet life ended forever. The Winter War began with a lie and an artillery barrage. On November 26, 1939, Soviet authorities claimed that Finnish artillery had shelled the Soviet village of Mainila near the Finnish border, killing 4 Soviet soldiers. It was completely fabricated. Later evidence proved the Soviets had shelled their own position to create a pretext for invasion, but it gave Joseph Stalin the justification he wanted to invade Finland, seize territory, and potentially conquer the entire country. On November 30th, 1939, at 0800 hours, Soviet artillery began bombarding Finnish positions all along the 1,340-kilometer border. By 0900 hours, 450,000 Soviet troops, 23 divisions, began advancing into Finnish territory from multiple directions. Soviet aircraft bombed Helsinki. Soviet tanks crossed the border in the south. The largest military power in Europe was invading one of the smallest with overwhelming force. The strategic situation was hopeless for Finland. The Soviet Union had a population of 180 million. Finland had 3.5 million. The Soviets could field millions of soldiers, thousands of tanks, thousands of aircraft. Finland had 300,000 soldiers total, including reservists, minimal armor, and fewer than 200 aircraft. Stalin expected the invasion to last 2 weeks. Soviet military planners had already designed victory parades in Helsinki. But Stalin and his generals had made several critical miscalculations. First, they underestimated Finnish determination. Finns remembered the Civil War, remembered Soviet attempts to create a communist Finland, remembered decades of Russian domination. Finns would rather die than submit to Soviet rule. Second, they underestimated Finnish military competence. The Finnish army was small, but was well-trained, well-led, and fighting on home terrain they knew intimately. Finnish soldiers were skilled skiers, hunters, and woodsmen who could operate effectively in conditions that paralyzed Soviet units. Third, and most critically, they underestimated the Finnish winter. November 1939 was the beginning of one of the coldest winters in Finnish history. Temperatures would drop to -40, -45 Celsius. Snow would accumulate to depths of several meters. Soviet soldiers from Ukraine, Georgia, and southern Russia had no experience with such conditions and inadequate equipment to survive them. On December 1st, 1939, the day after the Soviet invasion began, Simo Häyhä received his mobilization notice. As a Civil Guard member and trained soldier, he was being called to active duty. He was assigned to 6th Company, Jaeger Regiment 34, JR-34, Finnish 6th Division. His unit would defend the Kollaa River sector in Finnish Karelia, the exact region where Simo had grown up, where he'd hunted for 20 years, where he knew every trail, every hill, every river, every hidden approach. The Soviets were sending an entire division, 12,000 soldiers, to break through the Kollaa sector. They would be opposed by approximately 900 Finnish soldiers, including Simo Häyhä. Simo packed his gear with the methodical care of a farmer preparing for hard work. Winter clothing, his M28-30 rifle, a Finnish modified Mosin-Nagant that he'd used for hunting, his Suomi KP-31 submachine gun, issued by the Army, ammunition, his hunting knife, basic food supplies. He didn't pack for 2 weeks. He packed for winter, because regardless of what optimists said, Simo understood this war would last months. He said goodbye to his family, promised to return when the war ended, and reported his unit's assembly point. By December 5th, he was in position along the Kollaa River, preparing to defend his homeland against an invasion force that outnumbered his unit 13-1. The Kollaa River sector was approximately 16 kilometers of front line through dense forest and frozen swamp. The terrain favored defenders dramatically. The forest was thick enough to conceal small groups of soldiers. The cold was so severe that Soviet soldiers from southern regions literally froze to death in their foxholes. The snow was deep enough that moving off established trails was nearly impossible without skis. And Finnish soldiers were expert skiers, while Soviet soldiers largely weren't. Finnish defensive doctrine for the Winter War was based on these advantages. Finnish units didn't fight Soviet forces in open battle. They couldn't win a conventional engagement against a much larger, better-equipped enemy. Instead, they used Mahti tactics. Small, mobile groups of Finnish soldiers would infiltrate Soviet lines, cut off Soviet units from their supply lines, and destroy the isolated units in detail. Finnish soldiers would appear from nowhere, attack with brutal efficiency, and disappear into the forest before Soviet reinforcements could respond. Simo's role in this defensive system was simple: kill Soviet soldiers before they could attack Finnish positions. 6th Company commander, Captain Arn Juutalainen, recognized immediately what he had in Simo Häyhä. Here was a soldier who'd lived his entire life in these exact forests, who could ski through wilderness that would kill Soviet soldiers in hours, who could shoot with accuracy that exceeded most trained military snipers, and who had the patient temperament perfect for sniper operations. Juutalainen gave Simo broad operational freedom. Find good positions, watch Soviet movements, kill Soviet officers and important targets, harass Soviet operations, and do not get killed. Simo was authorized to operate independently, choosing his own positions, timing, and targets. He would report kills, but otherwise operate with minimal supervision. Simo's technique was unique even among Finnish snipers, shaped by his hunting background and understanding of winter warfare. First, he never used a telescopic scope. Most military snipers considered a scope essential for long-range accuracy, but Simo disagreed. A scope had multiple disadvantages in Finnish winter conditions. The glass could fog or frost, reducing visibility. The scope added weight and bulk to rifle. The scope raised the rifle higher, making the shooter's profile larger. And most critically, the scope could reflect light, betraying position. Simo used only iron sights, which meant as I was lower to the rifle, His profile was smaller, and there was no glass to reflect sunlight off snow. Second, Simo positioned himself lower than most snipers. Instead of finding elevated positions that offered good views, Simo often positioned himself in snow at ground level, barely visible, shooting from positions so low that Soviet soldiers literally walked past him without seeing him. His white winter camouflage, standard Finnish army winter gear, made him nearly invisible against snow. Third, Simo prepared his positions with meticulous care. He would pack snow around himself, creating a low wall that concealed his position and provided minimal protection against return fire. He would place snow in his mouth to prevent his breath from creating visible vapor in the cold. He would remain absolutely motionless for hours, waiting for targets, controlling his breathing, ignoring the cold that would have incapacitated soldiers with less tolerance for discomfort. Fourth, Simo chose targets with tactical intelligence. He didn't just shoot any Soviet soldier. He targeted officers, identifiable by uniform details or behavior, NCOs, who were organizing units, machine gunners, who were key to Soviet fire support, and soldiers who appeared to be scouts or forward observers. Killing these high-value targets disrupted Soviet operations far more effectively than random casualties. Fifth, Simo never stayed in one position long. He would shoot several times, usually no more than 3 to 5 shots, then immediately move to a new position before Soviet return fire or artillery could target his location. Finnish soldiers called this shoot and scoot tactics. It kept snipers alive and kept enemy forces constantly nervous, never knowing where the next shot would come from. The first week of December 1939, Simo was learning the rhythm of winter warfare. He would move into position before dawn, often skiing several kilometers through frozen forest in absolute darkness. He would establish his shooting position, sometimes using the same location he'd used for hunting, sometimes finding new positions with good sight lines toward Soviet-held areas. He would wait, sometimes for hours, for Soviet soldiers to appear. He would shoot, kill, and immediately relocate. His kill count began accumulating rapidly. 3 kills the first day, 5 the second day, 7 the third day. By the end of the first week, Simo had killed approximately 25 Soviet soldiers. His company commander was impressed, but not surprised. Simo was performing exactly as expected for someone with his skills. What nobody expected was how long Simo would maintain his performance and how high his kill count would climb. By the end of December 1939, 4 weeks of combat, Simo had killed approximately 140 Soviet soldiers. That was an average of 5 kills per day every single day, in conditions where temperatures regularly dropped below -30°C, where Soviet artillery regularly bombarded Finnish positions, where Soviet counter-sniper teams were actively hunting Finnish snipers. The Soviets began hearing reports about a Finnish sniper who was killing soldiers with impossible consistency. They started calling him Belaya Smert, the White Death. Soviet officers ordered their men to be more careful, to avoid areas where the White Death was known to operate, to move only at night or during snowstorms when visibility was poor. None of it mattered. Simo kept killing. By January 1940, 2 months into Winter War, Simo Häyhä had killed approximately 200 Soviet soldiers with his rifle, plus an estimated 100 more with his submachine gun during close-quarters fighting when Soviet forces attempted to overrun Finnish positions. The Kollaa River sector had become a killing ground. Soviet forces launched attack after attack, trying to break through the Finnish lines and advance toward vital road junctions that would allow them to cut off other Finnish units. Each attack failed. Finnish defenders, fighting from prepared positions in terrain they knew intimately, inflicted catastrophic casualties on Soviet forces. Simo was a significant part of that defensive success. He wasn't just killing Soviet soldiers, he was creating psychological terror. Soviet soldiers began refusing to move through certain areas during daylight. They knew that somewhere in the White Wilderness, invisible and untouchable, the White Death was watching. One moment you were walking through snow with your unit. The next moment a man next to you collapsed with a bullet through his head, and you never saw where the shot came from. Then another man would drop and another, and panic would set in as soldiers realized they were being killed by an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't locate, and couldn't fight back against. Soviet commanders recognized they had a serious problem. Normal infantry couldn't deal with Simo. They couldn't see him, couldn't get close to him, couldn't hit him with return fire. The only solution was counter-sniping. Deploy Soviet snipers to hunt the White Death, find his positions, kill him before he could kill more Soviet soldiers. The NKVD, Soviet secret police, deployed special sniper teams to the Kollaa sector specifically to hunt Simo. These weren't regular army snipers. These were NKVD specialists, trained at special sniper schools, equipped with the best rifles and scopes available to Soviet forces, experienced in counter-sniper operations. They were given one mission: find and kill the White Death. Simo killed them all. The problem Soviet counter-snipers faced was fundamental. Simo had every advantage. He was defending, which meant he could choose positions and wait for targets to come to him. He knew the terrain intimately from 20 years of hunting in these exact forests. He used iron sights, which meant no scope glint to reveal his position. He positioned himself lower than Soviet snipers expected, making him nearly impossible to spot. And he had the patience of a hunter who'd spent entire days waiting motionless for game to appear. He could outwait Soviet snipers who eventually moved or adjusted position or did something that revealed their location. One by one, Soviet counter-snipers arrived at Kollaa, set up their positions, began searching for the White Death, and died without ever seeing him. Simo would spot them first, usually by scope glint or by some small positioning error, and kill them with single shots before they knew he was there. Soviet commanders then tried artillery. If they couldn't kill Simo with counter-snipers, they'd obliterate entire areas where he might be operating. Soviet artillery would hammer suspected sniper positions with dozens or hundreds of shells, destroying forests, creating massive craters, killing everything in the impact area. Simo survived because he never stayed in one place. By the time Soviet artillery began falling, Simo was already 500 meters away, watching the bombardment destroy positions he'd left minutes earlier. Sometimes he'd shoot Soviet artillery observers who were directing fire, killing the soldiers who were trying to kill him. The Soviet command's frustration grew as January 1940 progressed, and Simo's kill count continued climbing. 250 confirmed kills. 300, 350. Numbers that exceeded any sniper in any previous war. And still the White Death was out there, invisible, untouchable, killing Soviet soldiers every single day. Soviet soldiers began exhibiting signs of what modern psychology would call acute combat stress. They became paranoid, convinced that the White Death could see them even when they couldn't see him. They started shooting at shadows, at snow formations, at anything that might be a sniper position. They wasted ammunition shooting at nothing, because the psychological pressure of knowing an invisible sniper was hunting them was unbearable. Finnish intelligence intercepted Soviet radio communications where officers were ordering units to advance, and soldiers were refusing, saying they wouldn't move through White Death territory. Soviet morale in the Kollaa sector was collapsing, not because of Finnish strength, but because of one man with a rifle. Simo's daily routine during this period was exhausting and dangerous. He would wake before dawn, around 400 hours in Finnish winter, when the sun didn't rise until after 0900. He would ski several kilometers through frozen forest to reach his operating area. He would establish a position, sometimes one he'd used before, sometimes a new location. He would wait, often for hours, remaining absolutely motionless in temperatures that could reach minus 40 Celsius. When Soviet soldiers appeared, a patrol, a supply column, soldiers moving between positions, Simo would begin shooting. Not rapidly, not frantically, but with methodical precision. One shot, one kill. Wait to see how Soviets responded. If they panicked and took poor cover, shoot again. If they organized effective return fire or called artillery, relocate immediately. Simo typically killed 3 to 7 Soviet soldiers per day, some days more. His record was apparently 25 kills in a single day when a large Soviet unit moved through his sector. Some days fewer, when weather was too poor for operations or Soviet forces didn't enter his area. But the average 5 kills per day, day after day, for over 3 months, was what made Simo extraordinary. Other snipers might have good days where they got multiple kills. Simo had good days every day. The physical toll was enormous. Simo was operating in some of the most brutal conditions imaginable. Temperatures regularly dropped below minus 30, sometimes reaching minus 45 Celsius. Wind chill made it feel even colder. He spent hours lying motionless in snow, which caused frostbite risk even through winter clothing. He skied many kilometers per day carrying equipment. He slept in whatever shelter was available, usually snow foxholes or improvised shelters, getting perhaps 4 to 5 hours of sleep per night. He lost weight despite eating whenever possible. His face became weathered and lined from constant exposure to cold and wind. His hands developed calluses and minor frostbite damage from handling metal weapons in extreme cold. His eyes became strained from hours of focusing through iron sights in the brilliant reflected light off snow. But Simo never complained, never asked for relief, never said he needed rest. Finnish military culture valued sisu, a concept that roughly translates to stoic determination, grit, refusing to quit regardless of difficulty. Simo embodied sisu completely. By late February 1940, the Winter War was approaching its end. The Soviet Union, embarrassed by its inability to quickly defeat tiny Finland, had committed additional divisions and was preparing for a massive final offensive. The Finnish army, exhausted from 3 months of constant combat, was running low on ammunition, equipment, and men. Finnish commanders knew they couldn't hold out much longer. Simo's kill count had reached approximately 500 confirmed kills with his rifle, plus an estimated 200 more with his submachine gun. He was, by any measure, the most effective sniper in military history. The previous record for sniper kills in a war, approximately 150 by a Canadian sniper in World War I, had been shattered. Simo had killed more than 3 times as many enemy soldiers, and he'd done it all in 100 days. On March 6, 1940, Simo's 100th consecutive day of combat operations, he was in his usual position along the Kollaa River sector. It was midday, around 1,130 hours, and Simo had already killed 2 Soviet soldiers that morning. He was watching a Soviet position approximately 200 meters away, waiting to see if any high-value targets would appear. What Simo didn't know was that Soviet forces had deployed a new counter-sniper team with specific intelligence about his recent operating areas. 2 NKVD snipers, working together, had positioned themselves to cover approaches to known Finnish sniper positions. At 1,132 hours, one of the Soviet snipers saw the tiny movement of Simo's rifle barrel as he adjusted his aim. The Soviet sniper, positioned 200 meters away, brought his rifle to bear and fired. The bullet struck Simo in the left side of his face, just below his cheekbone. It wasn't a normal bullet. It was an explosive bullet, banned by international law, but occasionally used by Soviet snipers. The bullet exploded on impact, blowing away most of Simo's left cheek, shattering his jaw, destroying several teeth, and Xing to the back of his head, taking a portion of his skull with it. Simo collapsed into the snow, unconscious, bleeding massively from catastrophic facial wounds. Finnish soldiers nearby heard the shot and the impact. They saw Simo collapse. They assumed he was dead. Nobody survived a head wound like that. But they crawled to his position anyway because you didn't leave comrades behind, even dead ones. They found Simo alive, barely alive, unconscious, bleeding from massive facial wounds, but alive. His heart was still beating. He was still breathing, though blood was pouring into his airway from his shattered jaw. They carried him to a Finnish aid station, expecting him to die during transport. He didn't die. They transferred him to a field hospital, expecting him to die during treatment. He didn't die. Doctors who examined Simo's wounds later said he should have died immediately from such catastrophic trauma. The bullet had destroyed half his face and damaged his brain. He should have been dead. But Simo Häyhä had spent 3 months lying in minus 40-degree cold, killing Soviet soldiers. He'd endured conditions that would have killed most men. He'd survived counter-snipers, artillery bombardments, and constant combat. A bullet through the face wasn't going to kill him either. Simo remained unconscious for 7 days. When he finally woke up on March 13, 1940, the first thing Finnish doctors told him was that the war was over. The Soviet Union and Finland had signed an armistice. The Winter War had ended the day Simo woke up. Finland had survived, though at terrible cost. The Soviets had achieved some territorial gains, but they failed to conquer Finland. Soviet casualties were catastrophic. Approximately 127,000 killed, 265,000 wounded. Finnish casualties were much lower, but still devastating for such a small nation. Approximately 26,000 killed, 44,000 wounded. Simo Häyhä had personally killed more than 500 Soviet soldiers, more than the entire population of his home village, more than any sniper in history, more than seemed possible for one man operating alone in winter wilderness. The bullet that struck Simo Häyhä on March 6, 1940, had caused damage that doctors in 1940 had limited ability to repair. The explosive round had blown away most of his left cheek, shattered his lower jaw in multiple places, destroyed several teeth, damaged his tongue, and exited to the back of his head, creating a wound large enough that part of his skull was visible. Modern trauma surgery might have been able to reconstruct his face relatively well. 1940s Finnish military medicine could do much less. Doctors stabilized Simo, cleaned the wounds, removed bone fragments and debris, and did basic reconstruction of his jaw using wire and what remained the bone structure. They couldn't restore his face to its original appearance. The left side of Simo's face would be permanently disfigured, his jaw misaligned, his speech affected by the missing portions of jaw and damaged tongue. The recovery process was long and painful. Simo spent months in the hospital, undergoing multiple surgeries as doctors tried to improve function and reduce pain. He had to relearn how to eat. Chewing was difficult with his damaged jaw. He had to adjust to chronic pain from nerve damage. He had to accept that his face would never look the same. But Simo was alive, and that was more than anyone expected. Doctors who treated him told him he was extraordinarily lucky. The bullet had somehow missed major blood vessels in his neck. The brain damage, while present, was limited. He could walk, talk, though his speech was slurred, and think clearly. Many soldiers with lesser head wounds had died or been left permanently disabled. By summer 1940, Simo had recovered enough to return to Rotjärvi, to his small farm, to the quiet life he'd had before the war. The Finnish government awarded him multiple decorations: the Cross of Liberty Third and Fourth Class, medals for bravery, formal recognition of his extraordinary service. The Finnish army promoted him from corporal to second lieutenant, a battlefield promotion recognizing his contributions. Newspapers wrote about the White Death and his incredible kill count. Simo didn't want the attention. He gave few interviews and said little about his wartime service. When pressed, his comments were brief and matter-of-fact. "I did what I was told to do as well as I could." He didn't boast about his kills. He didn't describe himself as a hero. He was a soldier who'd done his duty. Now he wanted to go back to farming. But the Soviet Union hadn't forgotten Finland, and Finland hadn't forgotten the Soviet threat. In 1941, Finland entered the Continuation War, fighting alongside Nazi Germany against the Soviet Union in an attempt to regain territory lost in the Winter War. Finnish commanders asked Simo to return to sniper duty. He was the most effective sniper Finland had, possibly the most effective sniper in history. They needed him. Simo declined. His injuries made long-term field operations impossible. His jaw caused chronic pain. His damaged face made him easily recognizable, which eliminated the anonymity that snipers needed. Most importantly, Simo had done his service. He'd killed more than 500 enemy soldiers. He'd nearly died for Finland. He'd given enough. He spent the Continuation War, 1941 to 1944, working in training roles, teaching younger Finnish soldiers marksmanship and fieldcraft. He passed on the skills that had made him so effective: patience, positioning, iron sight shooting, winter survival. Some of his students became effective snipers themselves, though none approached Simo's kill count. When the Continuation War ended in 1944 with Finland again forced to cede territory to the Soviets, Simo returned permanently to farming. He bought a larger farm in southern Finland. The Rotjärvi area was now part of Soviet territory, taken into peace settlement, so Simo couldn't return home. He raised livestock, grew crops, and lived quietly. For decades, Simo Häyhä simply disappeared from public consciousness. The Winter War faded from international awareness as World War II overshadowed it. Simo didn't give interviews or seek attention. He was just an aging farmer with a scarred face, living peacefully in rural Finland. It wasn't until the 1990s, when historians began seriously studying the Winter War and seeking out surviving veterans, that Simo's story reemerged. Researchers found him living in a nursing home in his 90s, still sharp mentally despite his age. They interviewed him about his wartime service, trying to understand how one man had achieved such an incredible kill count. Simo's answers were characteristically brief and humble. He'd had good equipment. The Finnish M28-30 rifle was accurate and reliable. He'd known the terrain. He'd grown up hunting in those exact forests. He'd had good training from his father and from Finnish army service. He'd been lucky. Many times Soviet bullets had missed him by inches. He didn't think he was particularly special. He'd just done his job as well as he could. Researchers asked him about the 505 confirmed kills, the official Finnish military count. Wasn't he proud of that achievement? Wasn't that an incredible accomplishment? Simo's response was revealing. "I only did what I was told to do, and I tried to do it to the best of my ability. There's no great mystery to it." They asked if he felt remorse for killing so many men. Simo's response was pragmatic. "I did not enjoy killing, but I wanted to fight to protect Finland, and the best way to fight was to do what I did." They asked what he thought about during those long hours lying in snow, waiting for targets. Simo said he thought about staying warm, about not making mistakes, about finishing his mission and going home. He didn't think about philosophy or the meaning of war. He thought about surviving the next hour. The interviews revealed something important about Simo Häyhä. He was a fundamentally humble, practical man who'd been extraordinarily good at one specific task. He didn't see himself as a hero or a legend. He saw himself as a farmer who'd done military service when his country needed him, performed well because he had the right skills, and returned to normal life when the service was done. Modern military analysts who study Simo's service are struck by several factors that contributed to his effectiveness. First, his hunting background gave him skills directly applicable to sniping. Patience, fieldcraft, marksmanship, understanding of how to use terrain. These were all hunting skills that translated perfectly to military sniping. Second, his physical characteristics were actually advantages. His small stature, 160 centimeters, meant he could fit into concealed positions that larger men couldn't use. His compact build meant less body mass to keep warm in extreme cold. His physical toughness from years of farm work meant he could endure discomfort that would have incapacitated soldiers with less conditioning. Third, his mental temperament was perfect for sniping. He was patient, methodical, unemotional, focused. He didn't get excited or rattled. He didn't take unnecessary risks. He didn't let ego drive his decisions. He was, in modern military terminology, an operator, someone who performed missions with professional competence and minimal drama. Fourth, his technical choices were optimal for his situation. Using iron sights instead of a scope eliminated scope glint and kept his profile lower. His positioning choices, often shooting from ground level rather than elevated positions, made him nearly impossible to spot. His shoot and relocate tactics kept him alive despite Soviet efforts to kill him. Finally, his operational environment favored his skills. The Finnish winter, the dense forests, the terrain he knew intimately, all of these factors multiplied his effectiveness and neutralized Soviet advantages in numbers and equipment. Simo Häyhä died on April 1st, 2002, in a veterans nursing home in Finland. He was 96 years old. He lived almost as long after the Winter War, 62 years, as he'd lived before it, 34 years. He'd survived the bullet through his face by 62 years, outliving most of his Finnish comrades and probably all the Soviet soldiers who tried to kill him. His funeral was attended by Finnish military officials, veterans, and ordinary Finns who knew his story. He was buried with military honors, his decorations displayed, the Finnish flag draped over his casket. News of his death spread internationally. Major newspapers ran obituaries noting that the deadliest sniper in history had finally passed away. Simo's legacy extends beyond his kill count, impressive as it is. He represents something important about defensive warfare, about how a small nation can resist a larger aggressor, about how individual skill and determination can make strategic difference. The Winter War demonstrated that a weaker military power, fighting defensively on favorable terrain with superior training and determination, can inflict catastrophic casualties on a stronger aggressor. Finland didn't win the Winter War in a conventional sense. They lost territory and were forced to accept unfavorable peace terms. But they survived as an independent nation, which was the goal. And they demonstrated that the Soviet Union, despite its massive size and military power, could be resisted. Simo Häyhä was the perfect symbol of that resistance. A small man, a farmer, not a professional soldier, who killed more than 500 Soviet soldiers through skill, determination, and refusal to quit. He embarrassed one of the world's largest armies. He terrified Soviet soldiers. He proved that individual excellence could matter even in modern industrial warfare. Military snipers worldwide study Simo's tactics and techniques. His use of iron sights is still debated. Modern military doctrine favors scopes for long-range accuracy, but Simo's arguments about scope disadvantages remain valid in certain situations. His positioning choices, shooting from ground level, using natural concealment, are still taught. His psychological impact, the terror he created in Soviet forces, demonstrates the strategic value of sniper operations beyond simple kill counts. But perhaps Simo's most important legacy is his humility. In an era where military heroes often receive celebrity treatment, where soldiers sometimes seek glory and recognition, Simo remained modest about his extraordinary achievements. He never claimed to be special. He never boasted about his kills. He never sought fame or profit from his wartime service. When asked late in life what he was most proud of, Simo didn't mention his 505 confirmed kills, or his decorations, or his survival of the bullet through his face. He said he was proud that he'd done his duty to Finland, that he'd helped defend his homeland, and that he lived long enough to see Finland remain independent and prosperous. Simo Häyhä was the deadliest sniper in history, but he was also a farmer who just wanted to tend his land, hunt in the forest he loved, and live peacefully. The war interrupted that life, demanded he use his skills to kill hundreds of men, and changed him forever. But when the war ended, Simo went back to farming, back to the quiet life he'd always wanted. He remained, until his death at age 96, exactly what he'd always been, a simple Finnish farmer who happened to be extraordinarily good at shooting. The White Death, 505 confirmed kills. The man the Soviets couldn't kill despite trying for 100 days straight. And above all, a humble man who did his duty and asked for nothing in return.